Hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's Artist Loft class on mixing skin tones using watercolor paint. I've had a lot of people that I know were looking forward to this class, and I have been as well, and it's definitely this I think will be one of those classes that I will probably refer back to multiple times going forward, since we've got a lot of figure drawing stuff on the horizon. And while I'm saying that, I'll go ahead and mention the class that is coming up in the next couple of weeks. Two classes, two premium classes that we have coming up. It's a part 1 and part 2 class on painting or drawing and painting a figure in a landscape. So first, next week, there's going to be a free class on drawing a figure in a landscape, or sketching a figure in a landscape. And we'll be using the same reference photo in that free class for the 2 premium classes that will come after that. And I see that our lovely moderator Chanel just dropped those links in the chat for you. So that class will be using this reference photo of my daughter, who was very excited to be featured in a Michael's class reference photo, since her brother got to be in the portrait class from a while back. So I've got this picture of her playing at a park near our house, and for that one, we will, create a palette together in. It's a 2-part class, so we'll create the palette, and we'll do all the studies of it, sketching it in the free class leading up to it, and then in the premium class we'll mix up the palette and we'll do this. And so the key points in that class that I think a lot of people will really benefit from is making the figure really interact with the landscape. I've been teaching drawing and painting classes to adults for many years, and oftentimes when when somebody wants to do a portrait of a figure in a landscape, which is a common goal in a painting class, they will focus on either or. They'll focus on the landscape so much that the figure gets neglected, or they'll focus on the figure so much the landscape gets neglected. And this is really not, I wouldn't consider this fully developed, because I always try to leave it, to the point that maybe we'll get to in a 2-part 2-hour class. But I tried to really focus on the center here, where the figure is, really interacting with the landscape, and that transition between the figure and the landscape, where the figure is touching, or, when those layers are touching each other. So hopefully you guys will all join me for that class. And yeah, so tonight's class is definitely, leading up to that class, because we've got a Caucasian skin tone in that one for my daughter's skin tone, but this class can be applied to any figure in a landscape, and you could do the same thing with those upcoming classes. You could use your own photograph of a figure in a landscape and apply those same steps and rules and tips and tricks that I'll be going over in those classes to your own photograph. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to render a variety of skin tones. And so I included this reference photo in the supply list for you. And I'll just switch to my tabletop view, and we will go over supplies. And by the end of the class tonight, you should have a full page of notes that look like this, where you will have mixed up a full range of skin tones or colors that could easily be used to create a skin tone. But we're going to talk a lot about how light affects skin tones, and how, you're definitely not, like, if you have, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get to that. We'll talk about how light and color show up in a painting, and how they affect the colors that you will be using when you are creating skin tones. So it's very complicated. It's much more complicated than people tend to think. And yeah, so we'll really get into it. But before that, don't forget to tag your work with those hashtags, Make It With Michaels or Michaels Classes, and follow or tag me on Instagram. I'm at Adrienne Hodge Art. Here's a couple of my business cards with my ethereal skyscapes that I do using primarily calligraphy ink. You can also follow me on Facebook, Adrienne Hodge Fine Art. And the supplies that we are using tonight are the Artist Loft watercolor paintbrushes, and I just tossed the packaging across the room, but it's the 10 set. And then I've got the 36-piece set of the Artist Loft watercolor paint pack, value pack. And then the colors that I'm going to be using are, I'll go over those in just a moment, but I've pulled out the main colors that we're going to be using here. We're going to be using primarily primary colors, and then a few extra colors that can help us get to where we're going. But then down here at the bottom, I've got, we'll do some notes where we talk about mixing browns using primary colors. We're actually going to start with that. So we're going to start off figuring out how to get brown to happen using primary colors only, so that you can see how, you know, to get a variety of brown colors, and then how basically, you know, you can use brown out of the tube, but you can also make your own brown, and how that's going to maybe help you get certain skin tones that you're aiming for, you know, because you're mixing them yourself. Okay, so I'll go over those colors in just a moment. So the paintbrushes and the value pack, 36-piece set of the Artist Loft watercolor paint in the tubes. And then I've got the 9x12 watercolor paper, Artist Loft watercolor paper. You're gonna want a water cup. You might want, well, you definitely want a pencil and an eraser just to take some notes. So I've just got an HB pencil, and you know, if you have your whole sketching set, Artist Loft sketching set there, that's fine. And paper towels, and that is it. And if you, yeah, that's it. Any questions about supplies?
No questions yet.
Okay, great. All right, so we will just get a blank piece of paper. I'll probably go back and forth between this new page of notes I'm making and the one I already have. Okay, so let's go over these colors that I pulled out here. So first of all, I have the gamboge yellow. I've got the burnt sienna. I've got burnt umber. I've got Chinese white, white that comes in the set, cerulean blue, violet, magenta, and Prussian blue. So there are a couple of other yellows in here that that I want you to grab as well. We'll go ahead and grab the lemon yellow. We're going to use that as our primary yellow when we mix from our primaries. Okay. And then I guess I did have, no, I made that orange. I didn't use an orange out of the tube. So yeah, we're going to use our primary colors, which are yellow, red, and blue, right? But primary red, sometimes it will say primary red on certain, I can repeat the colors, yes. You can also watch the playback of this later on YouTube and pause and slow things down too. I don't want to repeat too much, but I think that's fine to repeat them all one more time. All right, so the Gamboge yellow, burnt sienna, burnt umber, cerulean blue, magenta, your white, Prussian blue, violet, and then we grabbed a lemon yellow as well. So our primary colors are the yellow, the cerulean blue, and the magenta. So, we'll get to all these other colors in just a bit, but I want to start with just the primaries, and I want us to make some browns. So brown, I always love to joke, is the color that we tend to make when we're painting, when we're trying not to make brown. And then when we really want to make a brown, it's so elusive, right? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to mix browns using primary colors. Okay, so to mix our primary colors without going in too much to the color wheel here, I'm just, going to talk about some basic color theory. So when you've got your color wheel, let me just kind of make like an imaginary color wheel with those primary colors. You've got these primary colors kind of facing each other, right? And you've got a little trio there. And then in between those colors, the primaries, we've got our secondaries. And so our secondary color in between our yellow and our red is going to be orange. Our secondary color in between, you know what, I'm just going to get a blank piece of paper and I'll just write this in. So you don't have to visualize what I'm saying here. Okay, so our primary colors. So in between our yellow and our red, we have orange. Well, here, I'll just grab my orange. There we go. All right, and then in between my yellow and my, we don't need these secondary colors on the out today though, because we're gonna make these secondary colors. But in between our yellow and our blue, we've got green, and then we are gonna use this violet. So let me put the violet there. Okay, so we've got our secondary colors, orange, violet, and green. So those are, in between the primary colors. So now we've got these color sets called our complementary colors. And that's complementary with an E, not with an I. So it's not like, my red, you sure are looking fine today, like a compliment like that with an I. It's complement with an E, which means opposites. So they're opposite each other on the color wheel. So every primary color has a secondary color that is opposite on the color wheel. So this is where I always make people answer me, but I know the chat, there's always like a little bit of a delay. So I'm just going to answer it for you guys, but take a look because I really want you to like burn this into your brains. So the complementary color, the color that is opposite to the yellow is violet. The color that is complementary to blue is orange. And the secondary color that is complementary to red as a primary is green. So think about football teams, like, what is it? The Florida, who is it? I think it's somewhere in Florida, they've got orange and blue, right? The football colors, with the sports teams. I'm not super familiar, but we all know the holiday colors, red and green. Those are complementary colors. And then, oh no, it's yellow and violet, I think, is a Florida football team. There's got to be a football team that uses the orange and blue. So those colors are very hot. The Dolphins, I saw somebody say, Okay, but the point is they use those colors because they are so highly contrasted to each other. They are, you know, they look very bold next to each other because it's the opposite. The Gators, somebody just said it. Thank you, Florida Gators. See, I know my sports teams, and then the New York Mets are blue and orange. There you go. Broncos are orange and blue. So there you go. Lots of sports teams use complementary colors because they are so highly contrasted. Okay, so how we're going to make our browns is we're going to use our complementary colors. So I'm just going to, I don't know why I just erased the orange. I'm going to write them down right here. So complementary with an E. Complementary colors put together equal brown. But it's going to give you a different kind of brown, and it's not going to happen right away. So orange and blue. Red and green. And yellow and violet. And I realized that I didn't write it with the primaries all together, but that's okay. Okay, so and then to take it a little further, you know, just talking more about the primary colors, magenta is the most primary red. You've got all different kinds of reds, you know, and they might be darker or lighter, but magenta is really more of a pink, and that's your primary red. Think about the colors inside of your printer that go together to create, you know, all the images that print out of your printer. And oftentimes you'll have paint sets that will actually say primary blue, primary yellow, and primary red or magenta in parentheses, but the set doesn't list them that way. But I've also seen sets that say primary red, and the red is more of like, you know, fire engine red, but your magenta is more primary than, you know, like your fire engine red or your rose color reds. Okay, so we're going to create some browns using these primary colors. And I just realized that I forgot to mention one key supply, and hopefully you guys all have that in front of you, and that is a plastic paint palette. And I'm going to grab mine from across the room real quick because I just realized I didn't put it on my desk. Give me just one moment, please. It wasn't as far away as I thought. I got it. Okay, so I'm going to use, it doesn't matter which paintbrush you use. I'm going to use a small flat brush, whichever one you're just, you know, nice and comfy with. I'm going to use the quarter one, the one that says 1/4 in this Artist Loft set. Okay, and we'll go ahead and put our primary colors here in the, and you know what, let's go ahead and just use our no, we're not going to. We have time. What are we doing? What are we at now? 6:20? Okay, maybe not. I'm going to use, I was going to say, let's mix up our secondary colors using our primary colors, because that's just the academic in me wants to make us do that. But since I've got orange, blue, and violet right here, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just use my pre-tubed colors. So if you haven't already grabbed an orange and a green in addition to your violet, go ahead and do that now. I don't want to run out of time to talk all about those nuanced skin tones and how color and light affects them. But I want to make sure that everybody is aware that we can do everything we're doing with primaries. In fact, that's probably how I got really good at color mixing, was challenging myself to only use primary colors. Okay, so let's start with red and green or magenta and green. So you always want to start with the lightest color first, which with red and green, I'm going to call it the magenta, feels a little lighter than that green. And you want to take it to a separate place on your paint palette. And then you want to clean your brush off so that you're not contaminating all of your colors and mixing them all together too quickly. And then take a little bit of your green. So you're just creating a new area to mix these two colors together. All right, so what's going to happen sometimes when
Adrian,
oh, yes.
sorry, is that green just green, or does it have a different name?
Oh, yes. My apologies. It's the sap green is the one that I grabbed.
Thank you.
But any green will do. But what's going to happen when you mix a primary and a secondary together is it's going to start to look like one of the other colors on the color wheel first. Like this one looked a little purple. And then I added more, added a little more magenta, and it's still looking kind of purple, but it's definitely got a brown hue to it. So, you know, or if it was looking too purple, I could also add yellow to it, because remember, yellow and purple are also complementary. So if I add a little bit of yellow to this, if it's looking too purple, then it's really going to start to look brown. So you're going to get a different kind of brown every time you mix two primary colors together. So go ahead and create a swatch of whatever. I actually want to go back and just mix the magenta and the green together. I'm already contaminating my colors. Do as I say, not as I do, y'all. I'm already making a mess. I might have to grab another palette. But yeah, the browns that you get when you mix your primary and secondaries together are so nuanced, and they're just different. And, you know, write down in your notes how you got there, which particular colors you used, how much of each color, did you add a third color? You know, make notes in your sketchbook or on a sheet of paper like this showing how you got there. So like, I'm not going to write down everything I'm doing just now, though, because I want to keep moving along. Okay, so those were, well, yeah, let me write it down. That was the magenta plus the sap green. Oops. Plus,
Adrian, do you have any recommendations for a yellow if they don't have the gamboge yellow?
any yellow that looks really, oh, if they don't have the gamboge. Yes, you're gonna want like a Naples yellow or even a yellow ochre would be good. Just something that's got a little bit of a brown tint to it or an orangey tint to it. Okay, and then that one I got by mixing the magenta and the sap green. So it's just a different way of getting to, you know, your burnt umber and your burnt sienna. And you're going to see as we mix these complementaries and secondaries together, each time you're getting a more nuanced brown to happen. Okay, so the next one we want to mix is orange and blue. I'll clean my brush and try not to contaminate all my colors together too quickly, but I probably will because, you know, just how I am. And I've, you know, personally, like I always try to tell people what the optimal way to keep your palettes organized are, but I have to admit that's just not something that I personally prioritize, and it always kind of falls to the wayside. Okay, so when I mixed this orange and this blue together, I definitely got something on the brown side, but it has a little bit of green to it. So since it's got a little bit of green to it, I could add some red to it, since red is the complement of green, but I'm going to go ahead and put that down, because also notice how when we paint the swatch, it looks so much different on the paper or on your surface, your canvas. You know, if we were using acrylic and oil, it would be the same way. So this was the cerulean blue plus the orange. But yeah, if I added a little bit of red to that, since it was on the green side, it would probably go, it would get closer to that like burnt sienna brown. All right, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my yellow and my violet. And so you want to start with the lightest color first, start with the yellow, and then slowly add the violet, especially with yellow and violet, because that violet, the dark color, the darker the color and the lighter the color, the more the dark color is going to overtake the light color. So that's looking really green when I mix those two together. So if it's looking really green, what is the complement of green? Red, right? So I can add a little bit of that magenta to it. And then I should get a really nice kind of, yeah, canyon sunset brown. That's a color comes up a lot in landscapes. So all of this to show you how you can get some really interesting browns to happen just using your primaries. You know, because we could have done this with just the primaries. We would, you know, had to first mix the orange, the blue, and the violet. But we could have done all of this using just our primaries. So that was the yellow and the violet, and then it was looking kind of green. So I added magenta. But we saw that greenish brown that I got before that. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that we touched on all of that, and they were a little bit different when I did it here because I mixed these primaries. So that was the violet that I got by mixing my red and my blue. That was the orange that I got by mixing my yellow and my red. And that was the green that I got by mixing my yellow and my blue. So you mix two primaries to get your secondaries, and then mixing the complementary colors, the primary with its opposite secondary color will get you the browns. And I know that was a big mouthful of a review just then, but like I said, you can watch the playback of this on YouTube and pause and rewind that little bit if I said all that too fast. Okay, now let's get into these more nuanced skin tones here using these other colors that we pulled out. So I'm just going to kind of start in the order that I did here. So I kind of started with some very pale, some pale folks like myself, right? 'Cause I'm Irish and I'm very pale. So I'm like, when I'm buying makeup, I'm buying the lightest makeup that they have to offer to match my skin tone. But speaking of makeup, this is where I want to like talk about common misconceptions when it comes to painting skin tones. Once you've got a color that matches like what that particular person might use as a makeup foundation, if you were to paint like the entire face on your painting with like, you know, because my daughter's got similar skin tone to me. If I were to just take the color that like matches, you know, like what would be in a makeup tube and painted her whole body with that, that's not going to look like the way light reflects on skin tones, right? Because in the shadows and in the light on skin tones, skin is reflecting the color of the light that's closest to it. I mean, I can scroll through this Zoom right now and look at like our moderator, Chanel, has a very warm light in across her face right now, but there's also a little bit of gray and maybe some purple being reflected on her skin tone there as well. And then we've got, let's see, looking for somebody that maybe has, you know, you can just scroll through and look at like some of the other folks on their Zoom cameras. Like if there's kind of a blue or green light, like your skin might be reflecting blue or green. If you were next to a neon sign that had, you know, neon yellow, you're going to see yellow reflected on your skin tone. So it really depends on the light that's being reflected. And when I had some other reference photos for this class, but then some friends of mine were at the beach recently and they texted me and asked, did I still need reference photos for this class? And I said, yes, I think I could use some better ones than the ones that I had originally had. And at first they sent me this photo and I could tell that the day was very overcast and they didn't have strong light. And in your digital versions of these photos, you should be able to see the nuanced light that I'm talking about here. And you know, how it's different based on like the overcast day and then the sunny day. I was like, these are great, but it would be even better if you could do it on a sunny day, you know, like if there's a really nice warm sunlight hitting the skin, because when you've got sunlight, it's just, you know, it's illuminating the skin tone in a different way than on an overcast day. You're getting more of like like fluorescent lights, right, are going to wash out those reflections. It's really hard to see a lot of variation in skin tone under fluorescent lights, and it kind of reflects this like, you know, this sad gray color, or you know, it definitely makes things not feel very warm and full of life. And that's kind of like an old Renaissance trick, is if your subject is looking in your painting is looking kind of sad and gray, just add some rosy pink to it to warm it up. The more you can warm it up, the more full of life the subject is going to appear. Okay, so let's just start with our pale folks, but I just want to make sure to, you know, have that disclaimer that like you're going to use a full range of all of these colors, even when you're painting, you know, very pale Caucasian. In the shadows, you're going to have deep browns, and when you're painting someone, you know, who's Black and has a very dark skin tone, the light may be reflecting you know, very pale in some places, or it might be a very light violet. We could probably even do 2 hours of this class where I really got into, you know, all the variation that we're seeing on any one particular skin tone, but I don't want to fall too far down the rabbit hole here. But, you know, just keep in mind that there could be a light, you know, almost something close to a light pink Caucasian skin tone reflected on a warm sunny day on Black skin, and there could be something that's like a deep violet purple, something like what you would use on a Black skin tone on the, you know, in the shadow of a Caucasian skin tone. So you really got to pay attention to what the light is doing in that particular reference image, you know, on all the surfaces of the skin, and, you know, in the reference photo, or if you're painting from life, etc. All right, so, but just to match this one, what I used was the gamboge and the white. So that's going to give me this very pale. So I'm going to use every inch of this little palette here. Let's switch to a smaller paintbrush. I'm going to use a lot of the same colors over and over again here. It's going to be a lot of this, you know, gamboge white, burnt sienna, burnt umber. And then we're going to add some nuances of violet and blue as we get in here as well. Okay, so I'm going to start with my lighter color and then add the darker color. So here would be the white, and then we're slowly adding the gamboge yellow, and that was already a little too much. I'm going to add even less gamboge yellow. There we go. That's what I was going for. Was this super pale color. And this might be how the, you know, on the brightest like tip of the nose, like close to your whitest white, you know, on a very sunny day on a Caucasian skin tone, you might see something like that. So gamboge white plus white. And really, I'm just starting with the Caucasian skin tones because it's, like I said, it's easier to start with the lightest color and then slowly add your darker colors. All right, so then we want to create this more pinkish hue. So we're going to use a whole bunch of white and just a touch of magenta. And you can see how I'm doing a little too much, and I got like almost like a Pepto-Bismol pink. That's too dark pink. So I'm gonna get even more white and use even less magenta, and then I'll get my really pale color. So that is a very, very pale pink. So maybe like on rosy cheeks, or again, where the light's hitting. You know, you really just have to look and see what the light is doing on skin tones. There's a number of apps out there. I actually considered using one for this class, but then I decided not to, but I thought I would just mention it. But there are so many amazing, helpful apps out there that will pull the colors out of the image that you're looking at. There's one for iPhone called Palette Cam, and the one for Android that's similar to that one. If you just put in Palette Cam or Palette Camera, you'll see some. There'll probably be multiple ones, and they'll just, you know, create a palette based on the colors that you're seeing in the image. And that can be really helpful because our eyes just play tricks on us and we have a hard time seeing colors, and then even just our brains interpret colors differently based on what's surrounding them. And there's a whole lot of fascinating science behind that, which I could talk about all day, but we don't have time for it. But point being, the more you can study and separate the colors that you're seeing in what you're looking at, the more you'll be able to wrap your mind around how, you know, black skin tone can look purple, or how, you know, important blue is in making skin tone, right? Sometimes we just think those colors don't belong there for some reason, but they definitely do. Okay, and then the next one, I've got gamboge white, gamboge plus white plus magenta, and then a little burnt sienna. So basically I just mixed those that I just made. I'm gonna mix those together. And I'm gonna get more of this like kind of peachy color. And then if I put a tiny bit of burnt sienna in there, which we could almost even use that burnt sienna we made with the primaries up there, I think is pretty close to, well, it's a little bit different. This is the burnt sienna out of the tube, and that's the one I made using the primaries. It's pretty close, I think. Just doing a tiny touch of it there. All right, and that's going to give us this slightly darker skin tone. And again, these are like, you know, these might match the makeup foundation color that, you know, the subject that you're painting might use, but you're not going to just paint the entire subject in that color. It's going to be nuanced and it's going to change depending on where the light is hitting that subject. So that was the gamboge plus white and the magenta plus white, plus I added a little burnt sienna. Okay. And then the next one, I basically took that same color and I just lightened it up by adding more white to it. I'm just trying to match all of the skin tones that I was seeing in some reference photos that I was using. So these reference photos that I included, we could definitely, you know, compare. So far we're matching the Caucasian skin tones here, right? Where the light's hitting it, I'm seeing this one that's a little more on the yellow side. And then in the darker areas, I'm seeing those slightly darker ones. I'm just gonna do kind of like this action. So basically it's all of that plus a little more white. Okay.
I have a question for you, Adrienne.
Yes.
Which white is best for skin tones, China white or titanium white? Is one more opaque than the other and too opaque for skin tones?
Titanium white is your most opaque white. So if you want to, yeah, your titanium white is just, yeah, it's the most opaque. So you could use that for like your brightest white highlights on the skin tone. But if you're trying to get a color to be a little more transparent, then you can use this set actually only comes with the Chinese white and a metallic white. It doesn't come with a titanium white, I don't think. So that's just what I used. But yeah, it's fine. If you've got titanium white, that's fine. And yes, titanium white is the most opaque. And most color brands will have on the back these, I just realized Artist Loft does not say it, but sometimes they'll say on the back of the tube, and maybe some other Artist Loft products do this, but sometimes they'll say transparent or opaque, or they'll have like a little bar, like a little spectrum that shows you how transparent and how opaque that color is. Okay, so the next one was basically everything we just did, but adding a little more burnt sienna. So you can see how I basically just like jumped around and just like, you know, just changed these colors slightly by adding a little more brown or a little more white to match the variety of skin tones that I was seeing. And I was just trying to match, get as many different you know, bases to various skin tones to happen. So that was everything from the color above plus more burnt sienna. You can use these same colors. You don't have to keep mixing more. We can just kind of go down the line here. Okay, and then this next color, this is where I got a little more complicated. So that's everything, this color basically that we just mixed. And then to that color, I'm going to add magenta, white, and cerulean blue. So I'm going to squeeze out a little more white, and I could maybe even do that separately. So it's going to give us a really light, like lavender purple color. But again, where the light is reflecting on certain skin tones, you're going to see this kind of lavender color happening. So I got a little bit of cerulean blue, a little bit of magenta. So basically just make a purple and then just slowly add that violet to your white. So I've got this very light purple here. Kind of spread it out a little bit and maybe even clean my brush so I'm not adding too much of it to that skin tone I just created there. But that gives me something like that. Okay, so that was everything from the color above plus magenta, white, and cerulean blue. I'm just going to say blue. Okay, and now we're getting into our darker skin tones here. So I used everything from that color above, and then I added burnt umber to it, but I'm running kind of low on that color. Can I make it stretch? Let me add a tiny bit of burnt umber and see if I can get that color to happen. And it's tempting to use some of those other browns we mixed up because they're so close to the burnt umber out of the tube. I mean, that's my burnt umber out of the tube next to the brown that we mixed using the primaries and secondaries. So I'm glad we started with that. I hope I've inspired everyone to know that they can do a lot with just their primary colors. Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so that was everything from the color above plus burnt umber. Okay. And then, you know, we could add a little white to that and make it a little paler, or you could add a little more burnt umber to that and make it a little darker. I think we're starting to see a pattern emerging here, right? So now let's do this burnt umber plus Prussian blue, which is going to give us like, so in college, when I was learning how to be an oil painter in art school, they would not let us use black out of the tube. We were instructed to use dark blues like Prussian blue and dark brown like burnt umber to make a black. And that is because you know, a solid black, like, I mean, there's several different blacks that you can get in a tube, just like there's several different whites, like titanium white, Chinese white, zinc white, etc. Those are all the transparency and the opacity of those whites is what separates them, what delineates the different whites. And it's the same thing with the black colors in the tube. They're either more transparent or more opaque. I think it's lamp black, and then that might be the most, honestly, I'm not going to say because I can't remember off the top of my head, and it makes sense because I wasn't supposed to use those tubes of black paint in college, so I didn't really learn that much about them. But you know, one of the first things I did when I got out of college and started painting on my own was I rebelliously went out and bought a bunch of tubes of different you know, tubes of black paint. And then I realized after several years of defiantly using black out of the tube that I didn't like it as much as mixing my own black. So I haven't mixed my own black, and I paint a lot of night skies, and I always use dark brown and blue. The inks that I use indigo blue and walnut stain. Those are the two colors that I buy the most to make black. So when we mix our burnt umber and our Prussian blue, we're going to get this dark black, and that's where you're going to see, in the shadow, in when you're painting a skin tone, if there's no light falling on that skin tone at all, then you're definitely going to want, an absolute black where the light is not reaching, the skin tone at all in a dark shadow. On a warm, sunny day, the light's going to fall really strong in some areas and the light's not going to fall in other areas. So that's where you're going to want that solid black. And then to start to lighten that up a little bit and get some warmer versions of it for some dark black skin tones, you can add, you could mix up some of these lighter skin tones and then slowly mix them with the burnt umber and the Prussian blue. So I've done that a few times. Or you can just add a little bit of, let's try Gambauge, that Gambauge yellow, and a little bit of white, which basically we're starting back up here with the lighter Caucasian skin tones, and we're just adding them to the black. To get our deep melanin to happen here. All right, so that blue is going to really shine through when you do that. So you got to try to get it to be warmer. So you might have to use a little more of the, oh man, that blue is really taken over. All right, that's what I wrote in my notes. Burnt umber plus Prussian blue plus Gambauge white plus violet. Well, let's try that. That's looking gray. Let me add some violet. Purple violet is really the color that shows up a lot in black skin tones. Okay, so we might just have to do a little push and pull of these colors, which honestly, you're going to push and pull and you're going to end up back, at what happened when you mixed your primaries and your secondaries together. So that's why I wanted to start with that, so that I could, make sure to stress the fact that what we're doing by mixing up these kind of makeup color, using, the oranges and the yellows and the whites and the straight out of the tube brown, is just the same way of getting there. You're going to get these browns a lot faster, mixing the primaries together. That is not getting where I want to. I'm going to add a little bit of magenta to it. Here we go. So it kind of just brought us back to like a burnt sienna. Or you could, just use the burnt sienna out of the tube as well. Okay, I think I covered everything. So, to lighten that up, you can use the Gambauge, the violet, the magenta, whatever you have to do to get it to match the skin tone that you're aiming for. So let me do one where I use a lot of violet too, by the way. I'm going to use this color we mixed using our browns, and then I'm going to add a little violet to it so I can illustrate like the darker melanin skin tones where the violet shows up so much. Yeah, something like that. That really matches what I'm seeing there. So that was the yellow, violet, and magenta. And then I just added a little more violet to it. Yellow plus violet plus magenta. And then I added a little more violet to it. So just heavier on the violet, and you'll get a color that matches what I'm seeing in this darker black skin tone here. And then where the light's hitting it more, you might add a little more magenta. I'm feeling like more of like a rosy color here where the light's hitting it more directly. So a little more magenta than violet. Is there any skin tone color that you feel like, I don't know, I didn't cover, or something that,
While we wait for an answer on that, I do have a question for you.
okay.
I kind of think you answered it as you were working, but just for like clarity's sake, what if you mix a secondary and primary and reach something you like, but need to lighten it? What is the best way? Should we water it down, add white or yellow, or something else?
Well, don't be so quick to add white to it right away, because that's something that oftentimes people do, and then it ends up looking really chalky. And especially if it's titanium white, since it's so opaque. So try adding the more of the lighter color, or try adding the complement of what, like if it's yeah, like if it's looking kind of greenish, try adding red. If it's looking really violet and you want it to be more of a medium brown, you know, like a burnt sienna brown, and it's looking really violet, add more yellow. If it's looking kind of blue, add orange. If it's looking kind of orange, add blue. You know, just add the opposite of the complementary and see what happens. And then I saw somebody said an olive skin tone. So I feel like what you mean by that is probably, I feel like I've covered it. Like it would be somewhere in between these two. That's how I would describe an olive skin tone. No? But yeah, it's really all about the light, the color of the light that's reflected on the skin that you're looking at. So everything mixed up here today, I just have to say it one more time. We're kind of mixing up, like, you know, what that particular person's makeup tube, you know, foundation color, if that person uses foundation or makeup, or if they were to, you know, what color that makeup tube color would be. But if you were to just slather that color all over your painting of a person, it's not going to look very realistic. So you have to pay attention to what the light is doing. You have to, like, if there's some blue being reflected, like really using one of those palette cam apps that oh geez, I meant to switch my camera. You know, use one of those palette cam apps where it pulls out the colors, because you'll be really surprised. You know, it might be gray. It might look really gray. Like, you know, sometimes like really like around the eyes shows up really gray, or, you know, if they're just under a really fluorescent gray light, then if you're seeing gray, paint gray. If you're seeing blue, paint blue. And there's so many painters out there who use the full, you know, rainbow spectrum of colors to paint skin tone, and it looks very realistic, like skin tone. What I painted today for you guys was kind of just the base color, right? And then you're going to take your base color and you're going to add whatever color you're seeing reflected in that at any point in the photograph. So I'm just going to switch back for just a moment just to like illustrate that for a second. Like I might take this base color or this base color, like, okay, I'm painting this person, and so I'm using this color, and then I'm seeing some green reflected in it, so I add a little green to that. Or I'm seeing a little blue reflected in it, so I add a little blue. Or I'm seeing a little bit of red or, more purple, whatever color you're seeing reflected in it, add that to it, and then you're going to really start to match what the light is doing. And I'll talk about that more in those premium classes. And I know it's going to be very limited because I'm just using that photograph of my daughter. So I'm, I had to appease her. And so we'll be focusing on, what the light's doing on her skin tone in this particular photograph. But as I go through in that premium class, I'll be sure to remind you, if you're using your own reference photo with a different skin tone, to notice, what the light is doing and reflecting in that skin tone in the shadows and the highlights as well. All right, well, and all these same colors should help with painting landscapes or things in nature as well, right? Because the same color that you might see, like I said, in canyon sunset is the same, or on a sandy beach, or on, some pieces of wood, and trees could be the same color that you used to mix up these various skin tones today. Thank you all so much. Does anybody want to hold up their little notes page and show me? I love to see notes. Anybody want to share what they painted today? Your page of notes. And Chanel can highlight you real quick. Oh yeah. All right. Yeah, I love that I'm seeing some like blues and purples and pinks. All of those are going to be helpful, and make notes on how you got to all of those variations. Mixing any of these two colors together is going to get you a whole variety of colors we see reflected in skin tones. Oh, I see some nice big swatches. There's Sarah, very nice. Oh yeah, and we even applied that to a face there. Lots of rosy colors. So yeah, that's that Renaissance advice. The rosier you make the colors, the more full of life they're gonna feel, the more that warm light. Oh yes, I love those big swatches. Those are great. Hopefully you got some notes about how you got there. Oh yes, look at that. Oh, those are so nice and neat. Ooh, you got a lot of variations. Yes, that's going to be a really helpful sheet to refer back to. Nice. I like that you started painting some figures there. Nice and drippy. Okay, well, we went over time a little bit. Oh, thank you. That's a lovely one as well. Thank you all so much. This was wonderful. And hopefully I'll see you next week in the class on sketching the figure in the landscape, and then those two premium classes afterwards. Thanks everyone, and have a great evening. Bye.